everybody, and welcome to Taking Control, the ADHD podcast on True Story FM. I'm Pete Wright, and I'm here with Nikki Kinzer. Hello, Nikki.
Hello, everyone. Hello, Pete Wright.
Are you ready for this?
I am.
Are you feeling your age?
Every morning.
Every day.
Every day.
We are talking about something that we don't talk about enough. That is the ADHD brain and organizing and doing it as you get older and older. Because you know what? ADHD doesn't go away. It doesn't turn out. It doesn't go away as you get older. So we're going to admit that truth today. And we have a fantastic guest to help us out. Before we dig into that subject, however, if this show has ever helped you understand your relationship with ADHD in a new way, we're asking for your support over at patreon.com/theadhdpodcast. It's just a few dollars a month. You can help keep us growing the show, putting shoes on our feet and foods on our tables. We also, of course, have lots of great perks for you at the different tiers, including joining us for these live stream recording sessions where you can actually chat and ask questions live as we record. We sure would appreciate your support there. You can find us at takecontroladhd.com to subscribe to the mailing list, and we'll send you an email each time a new episode is released. And of course, connect with us on Facebook or Instagram or Pinterest or Blue Sky at Take Control ADHD. And for real-time communication, you can join the ADHD Discord community for free. Just head over to takecontroladhd.com/Discord. Our guest today is Jami Shapiro, founder of Silver Linings Transitions and host of the Grandma Has ADHD podcast, which is the best title of a podcast that I have heard in a long, long time. Jami is a certified senior move manager, certified senior advisor, and level 2 specialist in ADHD with the Institute for Challenging Disorganization. As the adult child of 2 ADHD parents and someone recently diagnosed herself, Jami brings both professional expertise and deeply personal insight to helping families move from frustration to compassion. Today, we're going to dive into how ADHD brains process transitions differently, why even positive changes can feel overwhelming, and what actually works when traditional organizing advice falls flat. Jami, welcome to the show.
Why, thank you. Thank you. And so I have a couple corrections. I was diagnosed 10 years ago, so I don't think that's newly, but I was 45, so I lived the majority of my life not knowing ADHD's impact. And then it wasn't until I realized that my mom had ADHD 2 years ago, so she was 76, that I really stepped into the ADHD space. I knew that I had a child with ADHD because, of course, along like a lot of other women, I was diagnosed alongside my child. But it was when my mom was diagnosed that my whole ADHD world opened up, and I ended up becoming an ADHD coach through ADCA, writing a book, starting the podcast. That was really the big shift.
Good. Well, it's so interesting that you talk about it that way because, like, my dad died when I was 3 years ago now. And one of the most interesting things we learned about my dad after his death was when my mom woke up to the fact that he had been living with ADHD all his life and had struggled mightily when he retired from his job in the news business. And I think my mom also lives with little of it. Don't tell her. We're not talking about that yet. And so this has become for us, I think over the same period, I think 2-3 years, just a really interesting place to explore from the ADHD perspective. So I'm really glad you're here. And I would like to say Nikki was just on Grandma Has ADHD a couple of days ago and came back. And this is what she said. Oh my God. This is going to be so great. I learned so much. I already did the rundown and I'm ready. So
Nice.
Nikki, take it away. Where would you like to start?
You talked about the switch, like just a couple of years ago, you decided to go into the ADHD or talk more about ADHD. And before we got on the show, you even mentioned, and this is so true, this is not talked a lot about.
Right.
Tell us about that. Yeah. Like what have you found when you went into the ADHD community and the resources and did you find people talking about retirement and things like that at all? Or were you like, oh no, this is right up my alley? And
right. So, I'm going to repeat a lot for you, and I know that there's the now and not now. Everybody in ADHD, the ADHD world knows it. And so, those of us, in our 40s, 50s, 60s, we aren't considering what aging with ADHD is going to look like. So that I'm going to leave that part alone for now, because what I want to talk about is something that no one is really looking at and talking about. And that is that you have whole generations of, I'm going to say women only because inattentive ADHD tends to go more with women. And if you had hyperactivity, it was more likely to be called out. So, Pete, my mom and dad both have ADHD. We knew my dad had ADHD. My half brother was diagnosed. He was the kid put on Ritalin in the 80s. So that was a known. So when my child was diagnosed, I'm like, well, and I have it. My dad had it, right? So I'm really focusing more on women also because women have more especially traditionally had more responsibilities in running the household than a father might have. And it definitely affected my kids when I was missing parent teacher conferences and didn't have the gold stars. So how this is all interplaying is that I started my career, well, restarted a career because, a lot of us tend to do a bunch of different things, but I joined NASM, which is the National Association of Senior Move Managers, about 13 years ago, and started a senior move management business. Do you guys know what that is? Because I want to make sure that if you don't.
I want you to tell. It doesn't matter what we think. We need to talk about it for the people who are listening.
Thank you. So yeah. I actually joined NASM. We are more than a national organization now, but it is predominantly an industry that started helping seniors when they were going through the downsizing, which we now call right sizing process, which is a very overwhelming experience. Typically, and nobody really likes moving. It's one of life's biggest stressors, whether you're neurodiverse or neurotypical. It's a big process. It's uprooting, it's change. But for seniors who are having to say goodbye to a lifetime of belongings, usually going from a larger space to a smaller one, maybe going from a home where they've lived in to either living closer to adult children or moving into a senior community, there's a lot more change. And so they really need experts who can guide them through the process, bring in all of the resources, help them make the decisions. So that's how this whole thing started as my second career. And I named my company Silver Linings Transitions because I actually had cancer a little over 20 years ago, and I was working as a realtor. And so the silver lining was reevaluating my life. So having said that, I am now building Silver Linings Transitions. And at the time, I did not know I had ADHD. I discovered that I have ADHD about a year into the business. And at that time, I'm now going through a divorce, starting a business, raising 3 children who are at that time 13, 11, and 6. And the psychiatrist who evaluates my child says, oh, yeah, you have it. Okay, well, I'm 45 years old. I have ADHD. I graduated college with high honors. Why does it matter? And I just, kept going right along. And then when I was studying to become a level 2 specialist with the ICD, I was listening to a podcast where they said that it's very common for women who have ADHD to also have migraine headaches and fibromyalgia. And it was like the light bulb that went off because my mom had struggled with fibromyalgia and migraine headaches for years. And I called my mom. And I used to, by the way, as part of what I would do as a senior move manager, I would do downsizing presentations. And I would go into senior communities and libraries and senior centers and help people talk about the idea of downsizing. So I would stand up in front of an audience full of people and say, I come from a family with hoarding disorder because my mom had piles of stuff everywhere, which if you looked at it from the outside, you would think that was hoarding. I called my mom and I said, Mom, I don't think you have hoarding disorder. I think you have ADHD. Listen to this podcast. Well, this is where it gets really interesting. So my mom listens to the podcast and it sort of all starts to make sense. So my mom goes to the psychiatrist who's been treating her for anxiety and depression the majority of her life. She talks to her therapist and she talks to her general practitioner who all confirm, yeah, sounds like you probably have ADHD. But her psychiatrist then proceeds to say, we don't do anything for seniors who have ADHD, which is absolutely not true. Yeah, I saw you both jump. So
Yeah.
now
So
everybody,
crazy.
right, may not be eligible for medication, but that doesn't mean that there aren't things that can be done through coaching and building a scaffolding and better understanding. And I actually just had Dr. Michael Lenz on my podcast, who has the fibromyalgia podcast, and he only happened to learn about ADHD when he was becoming a pediatrician in medical school because Dr. John Rady had come, which, he's like a pioneer in the ADHD space now. But he said, he even said most healthcare providers, especially those dealing with older adults, they have no training on ADHD. And he was even told every 7 years, everything changes. And so they haven't spent a lot of time and they don't understand the impact. And truthfully, I didn't understand the impact until I went through ADHD coach training myself and realized how many areas ADHD touches in someone's life.
So let's talk about that a little bit with transitions, right? Because that's what we're talking about. And we're talking about this major transition from living in this family home into wherever you're going. And we're also talking about where we are at with our kids moving out also. So now we've got, what used to be a teenage boy's room is now a guest room. And what do I do with all of this stuff? Right. I mean, there's just all these transitions. So can you tell us a little bit about why is it harder when you have ADHD when these transitions are happening?
Sure. So I think the few challenges that make it, and I think it's hard. Transitions are not usually easy for most people. So I do want to acknowledge that. But when you have ADHD, I think part of it is the out of sight, out of mind. Like you're afraid because you know that you forget a lot. And if you don't see this tangible thing, you're afraid you may not remember it. So that's that holding on to the memory. Transitions generally are harder for people with ADHD. And it's funny, I always thought that transition was, like a move. But a transition can even be, I'm working on this project. You want me to stop what I'm doing and go do something else, right? So a transition is hard and it's uncertainty. Nobody, especially in ADHD, uncertainty is overwhelming. So my life is going to change. What's that going to look like for me? And then it's a daunting task. It's a big project with a lot of decisions. When we are faced with a lot of decisions, we will, go into that decision paralysis. And then where do I begin? There's just so much at play with ADHD when it comes to whether you're making a move or transitioning that, bedroom. And by the way, I can speak to that. My youngest child is a senior in high school, and I'm looking at my own life and realizing, oh, this part of my life is changing. And that's really scary. It's so.
I found it to be really scary, but also I had a lot of grief when I was going through it, a lot of sadness. And that surprised me. I knew I would feel some, but I didn't know I would feel the heaviness of it that I actually felt when I was going through it.
Which has a direct impact on decision making, right? I was
Sure.
when my first left, I was inconsolable for a while. Like I couldn't, I just didn't want to go into their room. I didn't want to. It hit me hard. And I know other parents who just didn't have to do that. But man, I took it as a straight hit in RSD. It felt just like I had been rejected. Even though exactly what happened was what was supposed to happen.
What was supposed to happen, right?
Right.
It doesn't matter in my constitution. That's not what it felt like.
Yeah, we are emotionally dysregulated. When and that was one of the things that Dr. Michael Lenz had brought up. We may feel pain more intensely. We feel emotions more intensely. That's why, we can be described as too much. And, I write in my book that my high school crush just told me I was just a lot, and that was why it wasn't that I wasn't pretty enough for him, but he just didn't want to deal with all of that.
Yeah.
Oh my God. That's horrible. I feel like we should go back to that at some point.
Oh, it's a trauma.
We're not going
It's
to.
a trauma.
It's trauma. Yeah, right. Goodness.
Yeah.
Well, so how do we get started then? One of the things that I learned about from being on your show was you had talked about adult children and how sometimes making decluttering can make that actually, when you're doing it with your parent, can make it harder instead of easier. So tell us a little bit more about that, because that really struck me.
Sure. So it's actually really regarded in the industry that I am in that, you know, adult children want to step in and parent their adult parent, their senior parent, right? And they're losing, and a senior is just like we just talked about the loss that we're having as our children are leaving us, and that's another transition. And so, first of all, a lot of those older adults, they don't want to be parented by their adult child, right? And a lot of times we as adult children also don't want to really take on that role of having to parent. Like, we want our parent to remain our parent. And when you come into your parent's home and say, "Mom, you don't need that," you don't, that's taking on a parenting role. And that's creating conflict, where this should be a time where a parent is transitioning, where that adult child is really coming alongside of them and supporting them, and not, taking on an adversarial role. And so, it's funny because, and I experienced this personally, with my own mom. And even though I have a business that helps people do this, they listen more to a professional. And that really should be that neutral third party. Even though the adult child might say the same thing, it lands really differently when it comes from a professional. And it's also, generationally as well. I mean, if you think about, our parents and their parents, like professionals did, and they took the words of professionals in a way that it's probably going to change, but that's where we're at right now.
What's so interesting about that, though, is not though, what's really interesting about that, full stop, is that when I think about my dad, like when he left the newsroom, which was, he was in the Navy, incredible amount of scaffolding, right? Like, he was told what to do and when to do it and how to do it, and then did it. Then he went into the news business, where it was just response, 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 right? And he did that for decades. It was when he retired that the ADHD starts to come out, and he starts making decisions that begin to demand that he be parented. And I'm saying that in quotes, but he did things that were irresponsible because he was at an attentional deficit, right? He could not keep he was just dopamine hungry. As he aged progressively, he became more intent on doing things that were radical when compared to his personality for the first 60 years of his life. And I find that really interesting from the perspective of aging in ADHD. As an adult child of an ADHDer, you're absolutely right. I don't want to parent my parents, but then I need to figure out how to help them not do things that demand that they be parented, right? That demand that I help them figure out how to make good decisions.
Mm-hmm. So, I am also a certified senior advisor, and that's also a national organization, may even be more than national, but that is somebody that can really go in and assess the situation, tell you what resources are available, point you in the right direction. Because that's the other thing in our society, and this is one of my soapboxes, is we don't want to talk about aging. I mean, we even, call it anti-aging. There's anti-aging commercials, but having had cancer, 20 years ago, I want to age because I know that the alternative was not to, right? And so part of it is we as a society are not prepared for what aging is going to bring. And we don't want to have those conversations because we'd rather, put our heads in the sand. But I love the expression, just because your eyes are closed doesn't mean it isn't there. So that's also going to be a part of the equation. So we're just not looking at aging generally.
Well, and I think, credit to my mom, it took some years to figure out how to get comfortable with using the kind of language that would allow us as a family to come together and start talking about these hard things. It took years, but eventually we could kind of get there. And that's hard.
I was going to say that's also generationally. I mean, our kids talk about things openly. It's like if you don't have some sort of, neurodiversity, something is wrong with you, right? But our parents were very stoic. And my mother talks about, going to a therapist, and my grandfather did not want to discuss it, did not want to know about it. We just keep it all in. So kudos to your mom for, going in and asking for that help. I want to mention another reason that retirement can be so hard for people with ADHD. To your point, your dad had that scaffolding, right? And I'm sure you guys have heard that the incidence of ADHD went up during COVID because all of a sudden people were faced with all of these tasks. They didn't have the scaffolding. And I know for me, the more decisions that I have to make, the more overwhelmed I am. If you give me a day with nothing planned, I will shut down versus if I have like a big to-do list and I know this, and this. And then I learned something wonderful from a copper. I can't remember his first name
Jeff.
now. Thank you.
Mhm.
He was just for the second time on my podcast because he is introducing something that is brilliant, and I don't remember what it's called. But basically, we like to verbally, process and talk to other people as a sounding board and bouncing things, and then we can it becomes clear for us. If you are living alone for the first time, you don't have a spouse, your kids aren't there, you're not working. Who do you process with?
So this is a little bit of a different, I'm taking kind of a side detour a little bit, but it comes up and it kind of goes back to what Pete was asking around. You don't want to be the parent, but what if you see something that comes up that concerns you? And one of the things I think now that is just getting worse is all of the different scams and frauds and things that you see in the older generation, and how susceptible they are, to these things. And I'm just curious. I know it's completely outside of the organizing realm, but because you've worked with seniors, how do you address that, and how do you address it as a daughter or son, that is worried about their loved one?
Sure. Well, first of all, I think that it's really important that our parents don't want to feel judged or like that they can't keep it together, and I will tell you, even in my experience, I've had a few of those things come across my desk and or my computer, and I panic. And so I can so see easily how that scam would happen, or especially now with AI, grandpa don't, and I have had clients who have sent Target gift cards. So part of it is destigmatization of it. There's no judgment here. Like, we're all getting trapped. So to start from that place, like, hey, this isn't coming from judgment at all. I'm there with you. But, let's have some things in place that, if you get a call for money or you get a call, hey, well, why don't you just hang up the phone? And this actually happened with my own child that lives in New York. I got a recently got a text message. Hey, mom, my phone was stolen. Use this number now. And so thankfully I reached out to their partner and said, hey, I got this message. Is it, and it was a scam. It was a scam.
Wow.
I'll just say as an aside for all three of us who have our records of our voices on the internet easily accessible, it took me about 30 seconds to create a serviceable clone of my own voice and use it to call my mom and trick her, right, to think that it was actually me on the phone. And I just would say, with your loved ones, have a code word.
We have that in my family, which
have
you're
it
not going to
code.
hear. You're not going to hear that.
You're not going to hear it here.
No.
Have a family code word because
Yeah.
the scams are just going to get better and more authentic. Yep.
And just remember, they're coming from a place where they're afraid you're judging them. They recognize, here's the thing, cognitive decline is a normal part of aging. It is a normal part. What I, have learned is that it isn't that they aren't able to do the same task, but it takes longer. And there's an awareness, and there's also fear, and what's interesting too is, especially if people don't know they have ADHD and all of a sudden they're, forgetting where they, place things. They can't remember someone's name. They're dropping words. Those are also signs of ADHD. But in somebody that didn't realize they had ADHD and it's becoming more pronounced, then there's more fear. Oh, what if I have dementia? So, that's the elephant in the room. And that is, I don't know that we're going to be able to turn this boat around, but it would be wonderful if we could stop fearing aging and embrace it and put our parents back to that role of elders and letting them, sort of be the wise counsel that they used to be. but that's a whole other conversation.
Well, it sorta, but I just love the way you put it that, we should love getting older. We should love celebrating what it means to age, right? Sure, it comes with trade-offs, but the benefits are, my goodness, we get to live a long life, and let's appreciate that. I think that's really beautiful. And I think that fear, I mean, we're talking about it in terms of scams and ways to take advantage of people, but that's also what gets in the way of all of the things that we have to do as we age in decision making and letting go during transitions and, decluttering and keeping, our heads about our real estate and our own homes and all of those things. Uh, I think because of the benefit of the long life, it's hard to separate the meaning of the stuff that we have from the meaning of the memories of that long life, of the things that we've had and we've done.
And I want to give you another observation that I have actually come up with personally, which is really going to impact our stuff. And that is, and I think especially with ADHD, I think of Martha Stewart, right? And she just seems to be able to do it all and put it all together. And so you think, I'm going to be able to do that, or I want to be able to do that, or I envision me being the person that can do that. And so I also think, and so we will go out and we'll buy all the things and then of course we lose interest and move on to the next thing. But I also think that part of it is unrealized dreams. It's this is who I thought I was going to be, or what I thought I was going to be able to do. And, so this is the guitar that I was going to, learn to play. And now letting go of that guitar is confessing, hey, I never really did do that, So I think that's definitely got to be a part of the conversation on right sizing or downsizing.
Oh my God. I was that guy. I mean, I play a little guitar. I've got a guitar, but when I got into that era and I thought, you know what, I'm a big kid now. I'm an adult. I can afford a nice guitar. I think I'll buy a nice guitar and learn to play it. And I had that guitar hanging on my wall for 10 years. Right. It just like barely played, covered in dust. And that letting go was a catharsis. And I think we forget, like we get so in our heads about the act of letting go, that we equate letting go with giving up. And those two things aren't the same.
And I think it's such an important point too, for someone who doesn't have ADHD. And I can see why having that understanding is so important, because then you can go into the conversation with the person who has ADHD with so much more compassion and understanding, because they are feeling much more intense feelings, that this isn't just a guitar. This is much more to them. And so if we can educate folks and understand that it's at a different level and we have to work through that and acknowledge it and not just downplay it and be like, oh, just get rid of it. Right? Like, you never used it. Who cares? Like, you can imagine all the things that you could say. Like, no, we need to sit with it and work through it and figure out what to do.
Yeah. And I don't want to leave this conversation without sharing something with you guys. And that is that I hear this all the time. Why does it matter? And in fact, when I went to the International ADHD conference last year, and I was super excited, and my former mother-in-law, I call her my mother outlaw, says, why does it matter? They've lived all these years without knowing. Why does it matter? And first of all, at what point do you want to stop growing and sit in a rocking chair and not want to, understand yourself better? But there is a term that I learned about. It's called gerotranscendence. And it is, so Eric Erickson, when he was a famous sociologist, and he came up with the 8 life stages. And when he and his wife got into their 80s, and they had all their contemporaries who were, in their 80s, he started to, as a sociologist would, talk to them. Where are you? And he discovered gerotranscendence, which was developed by somebody else, but it's that 9th stage of life where we are retrospective and we're looking at our lives and we're questioning our choices and we're making peace with our choices. And I think when you understand ADHD and that has been at play, then you can look at your life through a different lens. And I think that's what I hear consistently when people are diagnosed is the grief and the relief that comes from the diagnosis, right? So especially for someone who's lived their entire life cobbling it together, not knowing that, and my mom and my relationship is like the perfect example of this. And that is that my mom and I have been at odds since I can remember. She put too much on me as a child. I felt responsible for carrying a lot of her emotional load. My mom started really, I would say hoarding, but not quite. She started bringing, especially after my grandmother passed away, she started to bring too much into her home, and then I got to the point that I couldn't even go into my mom's home because I couldn't look. The visual pollution was just overcoming. And then I felt responsibility for the way my mom was living. And when we both understood that this whole time it had been ADHD, our entire relationship transformed.
Yeah, I bet.
Yeah, right. It's like waking up. It's like
Mhm.
waking up to
Mhm.
something, to a whole entire new language.
So I want to get to the support. So here you are, you're working, you have a team of people that work with you and for you and in your company, and you guys help people with these transitions. And what, first of all, I have two questions. One is like, where do you start when you like actually are down? Let's just say right sizing. Like this is, I'm moving away from my family home. I don't want all of the responsibility. Kids are grown up, whatever. I'm not going into a retirement home, just getting a different, smaller house. What's the starting point on that?
That's great. It's with a plan. You always start with a plan. So the first thing that we'll do once we, sign a contract with a client is we want to do their floor plan. So we're going to measure their space where they're going, and then we're going to meet with them in their home. We're going to, get to know what are their habits, where's their favorite chair, and then we're also going to evaluate, their safety. If they're bringing a couch that doesn't have armchairs and they're, aging, and we know they're going to have to get on and off the couch, then that's going to be a conversation for us to say, hey, we want to factor in your safety. Ultimately, it's your home, you're the client. But I think anybody who doesn't know where they're going, having a roadmap and that plan is going to be the first step.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And then what are the strategies around, or what do you recommend with those tough decisions? Because you are moving into a smaller space. So not everything can come with you. How do you help them with what, kind of going to Pete's point, like how do you go away from the meaning of just, this is stuff, to the meaning of memories and being able to still capture those, like, or keep those in some way?
Sure. Well, that's where it's really good to process it with another person, almost like that bodily doubling of the stuff. But, when you're working with a client and they're going into a smaller space and they've got a 16-piece setting of china, hey, are you going to have those dinner parties? Or, hey, you haven't used it. Why don't we trade out your china for your everyday and actually enjoy it? And then, because we have experience, we know, especially if someone's going into a community, what is it? It's kind of like dorm living. Like if you are constantly moving people into the dorm, then you know exactly what they're going to need in a dorm, right? Well, that's what the expertise has it. But when you're explaining to another person why you're keeping this, right, then you're like, oh, and one of the things I put in my book is if you had to explain to a friend, why you were holding on to it, and it sounds so silly, maybe you don't really need it.
That's so funny, externalizing that reaction, right? Like, because and I think that's important. It's important for me and my ADHD to have that voice that feels not like myself, because I am a lot of the time an unreliable narrator in my decision making. Right? I feel very strongly about things, and I have to in sometimes the act of increasing friction by having that, at least an avatar that's externalized. Like if I have to explain it to my friend or my spouse, what do I imagine they would say? I'm usually pretty clear-headed about that.
Right. And I would say, a lot of things can be remembered with pictures. I actually, one of the things that I do when I do my presentation is I show my old retainer. And, because with ADHD, we think we're going to use it again, that someday is going to happen. And truthfully, I had my braces in college, so I was a little more responsible. I got them off, wore my retainer, and then kept it all of these years. And then when I was going through the process of after getting a divorce and having to right size or downsize, and I looked at that retainer and I'm like, that's never going to fit back in my mouth. Right. do you think my kids are going to be happy because I saved it for them? Right. And so I took a picture of it and I tossed it. And when I now go out and present and people can see, like, right, there are some things we're holding on to that are just so silly. And when they see that, it helps them.
It's such a good point. And that was one of the things I remember when I was organizing and I was helping somebody right size. Now that I have a new term for it, love it. And it was a big family home and she still had the dresser of her son basically his dresser from growing up, right? So it had all these stickers and it was all broken and everything and it was in the closet. And she's like, I just don't know what to do with it. And I'm like, okay, so a couple of things that we could do. One is, ask if your son wants it. Maybe he wants it, right? Like he has memories to it more than what you do. And he didn't want anything to do with it.
Of course he did. That's why you saw me nod my head. No, he doesn't want it.
He didn't want it. And so that was my thought too, is let's just take a picture of it. And let's take a picture of a lot of the things that you're letting go in this house. And take pictures of the actual rooms, so that you still hold on to that memory. And that was the relief that she was like, oh, good. Okay, I can do that. Because I think she was so afraid of losing the memory or that somehow that part of her life would get forgotten. And I love that idea is take a picture of it. And even if you want to write a little bit of something on it or something to, remind you, but it lets go of the actual item, but holds on to the memory. Makes a huge difference.
One of my favorite tips is doing a family show and tell, actually. And, during COVID, I did it before COVID, before I knew you could, go on screen and capture memories and have people from different places. But I think we want to be remembered also. And so capturing a family show and tell where I showed this was my retainer and this is what I was thinking. And then that's captured in all, posterity. And then I can also let it go. And so, that can also be it. I'm touring you around my house. This was your dresser. And, so that's just another layer to those photos.
There's a complication that comes into this process that I've run into, and I'm curious how you handle it, which is, we're in a sort of technological era where everything is electronic, and the act of taking a picture implies at least some sort of savvy with the technology around phones, around photos, around the cloud, maybe around storage and organization of digital assets, that can be frustrating for folks who don't do it every day. What's your line on that? Because it seems to run headlong into this awesome idea of taking photos and ditching the stuff. But if there's fear that you're not going to be able to wrap your head around the technology to be able to recover those memories when you need them, I can understand how that might get in the way of taking the first step.
I love that you asked that. So I shared with you that I wrote a book. I wanted to have my mom be a part of that book because I was really writing it to her generation. And so I set it up on Google and I wanted to do a Zoom call with my mom where I showed her how to use it. And we could not get her on to Zoom.
Yeah, step one.
Right. Old me would have been, oh, Mom, are you kidding me? Right. But new me, with the compassion that I had, I'm like, you know what? I'm going to fly out. And I'm going to sit down with you. And I put my mom on the computer, showed her how to use it. And my mom edited that book like a champ. And I think we need to, and I think Nikki knows when we were doing my podcast interview and I use the same platform that you do, I was struggling with getting my mic to work properly. And I'm, 55 years old. So I'm in between that being a digital native and a digital tourist, but it floods me and I get frustrated. So I think, especially with our parents, our older generations, and even our kids who have to go in and help us, I think an empathy and a compassion. Hey, I didn't grow up with this, and just, patience, which I know that if I hadn't discovered the ADHD thing, I would never have done that with my mom. And my mom, she even said, like, she was almost, so upset because she wanted to do this for me and she just couldn't make it happen. So I think that we need to ask for help. I think it's okay to say to an adult child, I really want to do this. And I always tell people, do it on a birthday, do it on Mother's Day, do it on a day when you're not going to get a no. And then they're your captive audience. Mm-hmm.
Right. Yeah, I get that all the time. My mom still asks me that. My birthday's coming up. all I want is your time to teach me how to do this, right? To teach me how to not feel like I'm at sea when I try to check my voicemail, right?
There is, just to throw in one other, there are a lot of different technology classes for older adults, and there are resources at senior. I mean, if you go looking, you're going to find these things. The problem is that, again, people don't even know that they're out there.
I think this is such a valuable conversation, and I think, it's one of those things we're going to keep coming back to because, again, this is what we're living through. This is the kind of stuff we're seeing every day. I'm so, so grateful that you have pivoted your business to this kind of conversation, Jami. It's so valuable to those of us living with ADHD of a certain age. And, we did get at the very beginning, one of our members was kind of preparing for the live stream and was joking about, what age is older? What does it mean when we say just older? And I wanted to bring that up right here, not in our member post show, because I think it's important to acknowledge that, at least to my mind, older is anything. It gives me the feeling of anything where I feel like my general baseline understanding of a concept or a conceit or a technology is feeling antiquated, that I have to work harder to keep up with whatever it is I'm trying to do. And it doesn't necessarily mean it's a specific age. It doesn't have to necessarily mean, oh my gosh, I'm over 50 or I'm over 60 or I'm over 70. It's just natural process of culture outpacing my lived experience. How do you answer that question?
That's a great way to describe it. So I'm saying 50 and over, even though I wouldn't consider myself older as a 55-year-old. But when I, go to the store or go to the gym and nobody looks at me anymore, I've crossed over into I'm older, but and it's also easier for me, and I'm not a grandma yet, by the way, but it was easier for me to say my audience is 50 and over because I can't speak to the experience of being 70 because I'm not. And I think a lot of it, again, back to the anti-aging, if we saw aging as you get to, and you have, it's kind of like levels in a game, right? I've surpassed this level and now I'm at the older level, right? Then our language wouldn't matter when we use that word, or senior, right?
Right. Senior. Remember when it was so cool to be a senior in high school? It was it was really cool. And now it's like, oh man, but I will say this. Let me just say this. I joined AARP yesterday for the discounts, y'all. They are sick. There are sick discounts. Like, that's something to look forward to. And who knew I would be celebrating that in public out loud?
Nice.
All right. Well, hey.
I was just going to say, I think you can get the card at 45.
Yeah, you can. And I kept putting it away because I didn't want to admit it. And finally I was like, oh, you know what? Who cares? It comes with a cooler. They're sending me the cooler. I'll take the cooler.
Awesome. Take that cooler.
I know. Look at this. Alyssa in the chat room is already saying, Pete, it took you this long to join with many question marks. I know. I didn't want to admit it, but today I'm feeling really strong.
There you
it's
go.
Good.
Yeah.
I'm very
Celebrate
proud.
It.
That's
Jami,
right.
tell us, so where do you want to send people to learn more about the work that you do? Besides, of course, the Grandma Has ADHD work, that the link will be spread far and wide.
So if you are looking for home organizing or move management in San Diego or the Coachella Valley, that would be Silver Linings Transitions. But for your listeners who might want help with a move and they didn't even know that this existed, I'm actually I'm a board of directors member for NASM. That's NASMM.org. And they can find people who do what we do in San Diego in other places. And if they want to find me specifically, I do coaching and downsizing clubs and workshops at Jami, Jami Shapiro, SHAPIRO.me. Couldn't get the .com for my own name, but I actually think me, because I'm living. Like, here I am. When I'm me, you get to be you.
Oh, love that.
I've actually been buying domains at .fun. lately.
Oh.
Do you know .fun exists?
I
bet
didn't
it
know
does.
.fun.
Yeah.
Jami
That's
Shapiro .fun.
.fun. That has a whole new vibe.
For the other side.
Yeah,
That's
right. All right, everybody. Thank you so much for hanging out with us. Thanks for downloading and listening to the show. And thank you for all of your time and your attention. Don't forget, if you have something to contribute to the conversation, we're heading over to the Show Talk channel in the Discord server, and you can join us right there by becoming a supporting member at the deluxe level or better. Patreon.com/The ADHD Podcast. On behalf of Nikki Kinzer and Jami Shapiro, I'm Pete Wright. We'll see you right back here next week on Taking Control, the ADHD Podcast.